And today we have a special guest. We're going to take a little detour from our first 500-year series to bring on Ben Bollinger. You may or may not know him, but if you run in my Facebook circles or if you are stuck in Meta's algorithm that matches mine, you've probably bumped into him. But Ben, you came from an Orthodox background and came into the Catholic Church this last year. So we thought that would be really an interesting journey to explore for our followers and our subscribers. So really, really thrilled to have you on. Welcome to the channel.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk about it.
So before we get into the content, I did want to do a little plug for one of our subscribers who developed this website called The Sacrament of Penance, all just one word, thesacramentofpenance.org. So if you ever feel an aversion to going to the sacrament of confession because maybe you're an introvert or maybe you're shy or maybe you're just like, dude, I don't remember how that goes or what to say or when the priest says what. Believe me, I've had the same issue and I have sweated before about it. So he made this awesome website for all laymen where you can go and see not only the new rite of confession and kind of get a lot of content for preparing as well. There's examination of conscience and all these different things. He also has the traditional rite in there as well in case you go to a TLM parish and maybe you've never really done a confession in that parish. And then he has this really cool thing where he has a simplified rubric version so that you can literally just, like, instead of being interrupted by paragraphs of rubrics, you can just see, okay, priest says this, I say this, priest says this. And it makes it a lot easier and more accessible. And it's really cool because at the bottom of the homepage is all of these resources. He has, like, links to classic thinkers, catechesis resources, books, educational resources. He even has links to different like retreats and pilgrimages. So take a look at that. It's thesacramentofpenance.org. Awesome. Dan.
Cool. Yeah, so when we were first speaking with Ben about doing this episode, he had mentioned that St. Thomas Aquinas was instrumental in his own life, and so we're recording on the memorial or feast of St. Thomas Aquinas, so I thought we'd start with a collect for today before we begin. How about that?
Awesome.
Cool. This is from a Divine Worship Daily Office from the Ordinariate, actually. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Everlasting God, who didst enrich thy church with the learning and holiness of thy servant St. Thomas Aquinas, grant to all who seek thee a humble mind and a pure heart, that they may know thy Son, Jesus Christ, to be the way, the truth, and the life, who liveth and reigneth with thee, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, ever one God, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father,
Great.
the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Well, that's a way better intro than what I had planned. So here's the thing. So we have a lot of Orthodox subscribers to our channel. Half of my family is Orthodox, a lot of Orthodox friends. So one thing I want to say from the get-go is that this episode is in no way intended to convert Orthodox people today or to disparage Orthodoxy or anything or any of the beautiful gifts that those churches bring to the church. So I just want to say that right out of the gate. The thing is, we inherited the faith from the fathers of the church, and that's beautiful. It's great. We all inherit it. It's our common inheritance. But there's another shadow side to that, and there's a common inheritance of our fathers' sins as well, and that's the schism. They left to us the schism that they created. So, in an ideal world, no layman should ever have to choose between the Eastern churches, the Eastern Orthodox churches, and the Roman churches or the Byzantine Catholic churches, for that matter. We shouldn't have to be making these decisions. It's evidence of human sin that we even have to do that. So a lot of people have struggled with that decision. I know I did in my own life. Dan, you had your own struggles. Ben, of course, you've had yours navigating these issues. And people come out on different sides of this. But the goal of this is just to understand, Ben, how you came to your side, because, like I said before we came on camera, especially under the Francis pontificate, which, regardless of anyone's opinion of it, the trend that I've seen in my own personal sphere is that people have moved out of the Catholic Church into Orthodoxy. So it is interesting to see in this last year that you've gone the opposite direction, kind of the same way that Dan and I did. We came in under the Francis Pontificate. So I think this will be a really interesting conversation, but I want to set the stage that way. And with that said, I do want to kind of get a little bit out of your way. How about you start with just like a general introduction to like, what was your upbringing like? Was it Christian? And then how did you kind of come to Christ? We'll kind of start there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I fully agree that I don't want this to be some kind of like slam dunk on the Orthodox. I mean, I have lots of friends who are.
I got to throw my notes out then.
Yeah, I still have lots of friends in the Orthodox Church, and I mean, I received. I mean, as I'll go into, I really have nothing bad to say about my experience in the Orthodox Church. It was great, and I'll go into that a little bit. But yeah, a little background on my becoming a Christian, my Christian upbringing. So I was raised in the Lutheran Church. I was baptized into Christ when I was 2 months old. I don't have the baptismal certificate, but I have witness testimony to it, so I'm
very good.
Fine with that.
Nice. 2 witnesses?
Yeah, I have like 3 witnesses, so we're all good.
Good.
Yes. So I was raised in kind of like a nominally Lutheran household. I mean, we went to church quite a bit when I was like a little kid because I went to preschool at the Lutheran church. But it was nothing too serious. We kind of like bounced around to different like churches, like Lutheran churches, Baptist churches for a while. But by the time I got to middle school, I was pretty much like not religious anymore. I remember I talked to someone on the school bus who asked me, is like, why do you believe in God? And I'm like, I guess I don't, because I didn't have any reasons for believing in God. And so I like quickly became like an atheist in middle school. And then from there, I kind of just like, I became like a very militant atheist too. So I was like one of those annoying people on like this app called iFunny, which is like a really dumb app. And I had like,
this is in middle school?
This was in middle school, yeah.
I've never heard
A middle school atheist, wow.
Middle school atheist, yeah, yeah, well. And so I had an iFunny account for atheism, and then I kind of moved away from caring about religion at all, and I moved like more into like politics, and I kind of made that like my whole life, and I was like just bouncing around to different political worldviews. Like one day I'm a libertarian, the next day I'm like a Marxist, kind of bouncing around there. And that was until I got to high school, specifically my junior year of high school, which, you can imagine that someone who is living a lot of their life online in politics as a kid isn't like the most sociable person in the world. So I didn't have a lot of like friends and social experiences. And so my junior year of high school is when I had like my first experience with like heartbreak. And, it's the age-old story, heartbreak, and that leads to me being more open to God. And what was also interesting, what that was happening during that time, is a lot of people in the political community were like becoming Catholic and Orthodox. And at that point, I really had like no idea. I mean, I knew like what Catholicism was, I kind of knew what Orthodoxy was, but like all these people that I like was following were like starting to become.
What year is this?
Like religious, and I thought that was okay. That's interesting. Yeah, and this was like back in like 2017. This was happening. At least the people in the spheres I was running in were like all starting to become religious. And there was like one guy I was following on YouTube who became Catholic, and he made like a video about like the book of Deuteronomy or something. And I remember just watching and being like, oh, this is something. And that's kind of what got like YouTube to start recommending videos to my feed that were kind of like religious. And one of the videos they recommended was a video by Classical Theist, if you know who that is on YouTube. He made a video called An Argument for the Existence of God. And I thought that was interesting. I clicked on it, I watched it, and he went through St. Thomas's argument from motion for the existence of God. And I remember watching that, and by the end of it, I was like, I have no idea what he just said. Like, I was like so...
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was so confused. But
that's great, right?
Yeah, no, it was...
That's a lot of people's experience, right? That like they think that belief in God is stupid or dumbed down or something, but then they come up against a great theologian and they're like, oh, wait a minute, I guess I'm not as smart as I thought.
Yes. And what was interesting is usually that would like, be a nick at my pride, and like that would like affect me in a negative way. But it actually like intrigued me. It made me interested. It made me like, oh, maybe there is more to this. And at that point, like I said, going through heartbreak, I was kind of more open to like, the meaning of life, stuff like that. And so that's why I came across another video by another Catholic YouTuber named Mathema. He basically went through the same argument, but kind of like dumbed it down a little bit and like, gave nice little pictures that I could follow along with. And I actually understood the argument. And I remember by the end of that video, I was like, well, shoot, I guess God's real. That's crazy. And so it was St. Thomas's argument from motion, like the argument from contingency, and I was, that's how I came to
there's a
belief
God.
in God.
So yeah. So you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but the heartbreak you're talking about, is this over like a female heartbreak, or is this like a death in the family heartbreak, or what kind of?
Oh yeah, it was with a girl. Yeah, I should probably specify that.
Yeah. Many a heartbreak leading to the faith.
Yep, it's so true. The age-old story.
So you're making kind of an emotional and a rational move kind of simultaneously. Usually there's like, when those horses are racing, one is a little bit ahead of the other. At this phase in your life, was the rational a little bit ahead of the emotional?
I think so. I mean, it's hard for me to tell. It happened a while ago, and it's like when your emotions and your head are like mixed together, it's hard to tell. But it was definitely, my experience of it was more like intellectual. But it was like intellectual almost in like a spiritual way, in the way of like the intellect being like purified with the knowledge of God, and like really seeing like when I came to like intellectually know who God was, like that was like a profound spiritual experience for me. Like I remember I read David Bentley Hart's book, The Experience of God, which is like a very like philosophical, technical book. But like that was like a profound like spiritual experience for me reading that book, was because just like the way he was describing God, it felt like I was like meeting him for the first time, of really understanding like that God is not just a good being, but he is goodness. He's not just a beautiful being, he is beauty. Like that just really spoke to me, and like that spoke like to my mind, but also to my heart. So they were very connected.
Now, did you have already a good background, perhaps outside of high school, I suppose, in philosophy and theology, anything like that, or were you just coming to this kind of fresh?
This was like totally brand new to me. So like I had no serious philosophical background. I kind of like posed as a pseudo-intellectual on like issues of economics and politics,
like every atheist.
Like every atheist, yeah. And of course, I had the superficial, like I read or I watched Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion video series. Although I will say, I remember watching that video for the first time, and he went to a Catholic pilgrimage site, and he's like, yeah, there's millions of people who come here, and there's only like 5 miracles that happen every year. I'm like, what do you mean 5 miracles happen every year? Like, what? Shouldn't there be 0? Anyways, that's a bit of a tangent.
So at this time, okay, you're learning. What's your prayer life like at this time?
Yeah, so I was like, when I was introduced to God, it was like Catholics who were telling me about God. And so I realized like, okay, I have a lot of things I'm doing in my life that I probably shouldn't be doing. And I don't have any religious family or friends, so I don't really know like what to do or where to go. But I'm like, well, these guys are Catholic. St. Thomas is Catholic. So I guess I should start looking into the Catholic Church. And so, I started reading up on like, Catholic theology. And I was like looking up like Catholic prayers and stuff. So my prayer life was basically like me like Googling like Catholic prayers, and like basically like what I found out later were the Psalms is actually what I was praying a lot of. So that's what I was doing. It was largely, like I said, I had no real like foundation in the real world. So I just kind of had to rely on my own searching of the internet to find stuff like that.
I'm very surprised how quickly you accelerated, though. I mean, that's fast, because even for myself, like became evangelical. I kind of had the born again experience when I was pretty young, and gosh, I didn't start praying the Psalms or like the daily office or any of that kind of stuff until many years later. So it's interesting that you jumped into that quickly.
Yeah, it was.
I was still doing like Lord, we just
right. I mean, like I also like. I mean, this was like after like a month or so after I like first encountered the arguments for God's existence, and I was reading up on Catholic theology. I found people like Brant Petrie, Scott Hahn. I found like EWTN. I found like Catholic Answers, like all the Catholic apologetics kind of stuff. And I actually ended up buying, I bought two things, which I still have. I bought an icon of our Lord, and then I bought a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Well,
And,
choose one.
and so I would like pray in front of those.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was kind of like my prayer corner that I set up.
So it's interesting because to go back to add on to what Steve was getting at. So, it was through knowledge that your mind kind of becomes purified or whatever. But did you see it in your conversion, I guess, an immediate connection between knowing God and ethics and morality? Like, was that almost immediate where you thought, okay, if I believe in God, something has to change in my life? Or did that come later?
It was, well, my acceptance of God's existence was pretty close to my acceptance of Christianity, because I figured, like, okay, it really didn't make sense to me if God existed, if like just there was no religion that was true. Like, it seemed to me to make sense that if God is real, that there has to be some kind of religion that he revealed to mankind. Yeah, self-revelation. And actually, Mathema and Classical Theists did a video together where they kind of went through how, like, we can't prove Christianity philosophically, right? It's a revealed religion, but we can like philosophically approximate certain things, like how God, he's naturally self-diffusive, so he would probably do something to unite himself to us in a very perfect way, and that's what the incarnation is. And he would allow us to share in that incarnate life, and that's the church and her sacraments. And so for me, like, the truth of God's existence and the truth of the claims of Christianity, and specifically like Catholic Christianity, were really together. And on top of that, I was also introduced to like Brant Petrie, who really like did a lot to convince me of like the divine inspiration of the Bible, like because he showed like the typologies between like Christ and the Old Testament, especially with stories like the sacrifice of Isaac, and just seeing those parallels, I was just like, wow, there really does seem to be something behind all of this. And obviously, once I have the Christianity, the morality kind of flows naturally from that. So I guess they were pretty closely linked together.
Steve, I brought that up because if I'm recalling our story very quickly, the morality came later. It's almost like but we entered things through the Bible, right? So we entered through reading St. Paul, and I think the way you came, Ben, is you were looking at theologians already, and theologians already speaking to you. So it's like a little bit of a difference. I think an evangelical experience through the Bible, we kind of had to learn slowly. Okay, your life does have to actually change. But yours almost right away. There was an instant connection, which is interesting.
So I've heard Aquinas, I've heard Petrie, Scott Hahn. How did you go from that track, which is clearly very Catholic, to how did you get introduced to the East and start flirting with the East?
Yes. So that happened. So like at this point, this is like a couple months into, this is like December 2017. This is like when I'm first coming to Christianity and reading about St. Thomas, reading about the Catholic faith. And, I quickly I'm like, okay, Protestantism's clearly not it. Like, I kind of just set that one aside pretty quickly. But I started reading. I did.
Why? Why?
It was basically like, I kind of like was introduced right away to Catholic apologetics, and it just made a lot of sense to me. Like their teachings on justification, when I was reading like Paul and James, I really just wasn't seeing the Protestant doctrine of justification. I was understanding like, apostolic succession just made a lot of like intuitive sense to me. Like, it wasn't like the most intellectually rigorous decision to set aside Protestantism. It just kind of was like something I intuited. I'm like, Catholicism just has like the history behind it, has that tradition. And obviously, I fell in love with the writings of St. Thomas, and, he just has an answer for everything in the Summa Theologia. I was like, that was like enough for me. Once again, I'm not saying that was like super intellectually rigorous, but that was just kind of my intuition. I'm like, okay, well, it seems to me like if Christianity is true, it's going to be like Catholicism. And that kind of goes into like my discovery of Orthodoxy, was because I was also reading the blog of Eric Ybarra. And I'm sure you're familiar with Eric's work. I mean, he's probably like the best of papal apologetics you can get. And I was exposed to his writings like right off the bat. And he's actually how I got introduced to Eastern Orthodoxy. because obviously this is back in like 2018. He's
So it's Eric's fault.
writing a lot about.
I can give Eric crap
Orthodox.
then for this. Okay.
Yes. But he has a redemption arc. But yeah, so yeah. So it was largely through the writings of Eric Ibarra that I figured out what orthodoxy was. And to be honest, when I first encountered orthodoxy, I didn't buy it. I was reading Eric's responses to certain Orthodox writers. He had a lot of back and forth articles with Craig Trulia, and he was responding to a bunch of Orthodox scholars Michael Welton, his Two Paths book. He had some videos or podcasts about that. And I found his stuff very compelling. And so right off the bat, I was leaning Catholic. When I read something the statement from Philip the Legate at the Third Ecumenical Council, which says, divine institution of the papacy, Peter, Pope, all that stuff made sense to me. But what got me to start taking Orthodoxy a little bit more seriously was when I started going to Mass on Sunday. I went to
Sorry.
Where'd you go?
I went to my local Novus Ordo parish because this is the first few months I'm like rah Catholicism, all true, it's the best. But I wasn't actually going to Mass. I was kind of just doing it, do it yourself. I'm like, okay, I have to go to Mass. I have to actually stop just reading and just start going to Mass. And so I just went to I'm like, oh, there's a Catholic church 5 minutes away from me. So I went there. And, I didn't have a terrible experience, but it was a little bit, it reminded me a lot of my Protestant upbringing. And, my Protestant upbringing it was nominal, right? But I didn't like it. And it was very off-putting to me. And on top of that, I mean, keep in mind, I am still the socially awkward teenager who was just heavily involved in online politics and had no social life. And so when I'm going to this strange place where there's all these people and not a single person comes up to me and says, hey, who are you? Hi, how can I help you? And and everyone's doing all this weird stuff that I don't know what they're doing. It just was very off-putting to me. And it just gave me a very negative experience. And so there was this disconnect between I was really loving what I was reading about the Catholic faith, but my actual real life experience with it was lacking. And it was I just wasn't getting what I felt like I should be getting, which is very subjective, but I just felt there's something missing here. That was kind of then that's what pushed me kind of towards looking into orthodoxy more. It's okay, maybe there is something to their objections, even though I can't see it intellectually. I can kind of feel it almost.
And so a pause there for a second. Back to something you said previously that kind of strikes me when I'm thinking about it. When you said that you kind of started with Thomas Aquinas, right? So if you're starting with Thomas Aquinas and then you go and read Calvin, Luther, I can see now how that would be less convincing. Especially if you've really read Thomas Aquinas, if you're really reading it. Because one of the things that kind of struck me after coming out of Protestantism, and for the first time, honestly, reading Thomas Aquinas after being a Protestant and stuff, when Dan and I had a really great seminar on the Reformation in our graduate school experience. And just in that class, we dove so deep into Reformation sources and history and all that, and I think we really left that class with a bad taste in our mouth for a lot of what was going on. But it's funny because you don't realize just how redundant, I don't know, or something what the Protestants are saying. It's kind of that's kind of already been addressed a lot. A lot, justification has already kind of been talked about and addressed, And yeah, it's true. But see, if you're not exposed to Thomas Aquinas, and a lot of times Protestant polemic will start by saying that, they always have that whole story of the West becomes very rationalistic. You have the nominalist school. You have, this scholasticism, Thomas Aquinas. Somehow they link Thomas Aquinas directly to that, and then they start their thing, right? And you're and getting back to the Bible and getting away from this cold rationalism and stuff. But you look back at it and you're looking at Thomas Aquinas and you're that's not at all Thomas Aquinas, in fact, you're sometimes even struck by how Eastern Thomas can sound at many turns. And I think a lot of Eastern Catholics appreciate that. There's a lot of Eastern Catholics who do appreciate Thomas Aquinas for that. Now, at this point, in your journey though, is Eastern Catholicism like not even on your radar? Like you don't even know anything about it, or is it something that you knew about but didn't buy it or something?
That is a great question, because it was I was kind of thinking, I'm like, okay, so I really like, I don't see Orthodoxy intellectually, like at all. Like I am not convinced. Like I read the Orthodox blogs. Like I was reading like Craig Trulia's blog, this blog called Shameless Orthodoxy. And granted, I mean, they're all, internet blogs, not serious scholarship, but I'm a teenager.
No.
Give me some slack there. And so, and so I wasn't, I was reading these, and then just like all their arguments, like, oh, well, Peter's not really the rock of the church. I'm like, clearly they haven't engaged with like what I'm seeing in Catholic apologetics. Like these people have not seen the best of what Catholicism has to offer. And that was just very apparent to me. So I did look into Eastern Catholicism, and I actually did visit an Eastern Catholic church near my house. And I have to say though, I had a awful experience at the liturgy there. It was like just the people just treated me very poorly, and it just, left a very sour taste in my mouth. And I never went back to it. And so, once again, we're not purely intellectual beings. Our experiences and emotions have a great impact on us. And so that just kind of like drove me away from like going towards the Eastern tradition. That even like put me off when I was starting to look into Orthodoxy. That left a sour taste in my mouth.
It's like somebody can tell you that, hey, it turns out this is your home over here. This is like your family's house. The DNA tells us this is where you live, and then you go there and it's like a crack house or something. You're like, okay, yeah, that's great. Maybe that is, where I should be or something, but I'm not going to stake my claim here. I'm not going to live my life here. So I had a lot of similar experiences too, where it's very much on that more not objective, but subjective level. But that's important, right? Like it is important.
Yes, it is.
But so you'd say then you started to visit Orthodox liturgies, and it was the liturgy itself that felt like, well, wait a minute, maybe this matches up with Catholic theology. Actually, the depth of Catholic theology, it's like this is almost the liturgy I should have been getting.
It was, yeah. So basically, like, I was very disillusioned with Catholicism. I even attended, a Latin Mass in Chicago once, and I still, like, I mean, it was beautiful, but, like, once again, nobody came up to me, nobody talked to me. It was just I felt very alone in the Catholic Church. I felt like I had no place. And so kind of in, like, an act of, like, desperation almost, because, like, I could feel myself, like, spiritually slipping, and I didn't want to. I wanted to live the Christian life, I really wanted to. And so I kind of, like, in an act of desperation, I sent out like emails to like Orthodox priests in my area, just asking if they wanted to like get together and talk. And one Orthodox priest got back to me. Actually, it turns out one of the Orthodox priests I messaged was an Oriental Orthodox priest, which I had no idea what that was at the time. But that's an interesting caveat there. But it was an Eastern Orthodox priest who got back to me, who actually himself was a convert from like Baptist Protestantism. And he invited me to come talk with him. And yeah, so I drove over there, and I vividly remember like driving over there thinking like, I am not going to become Orthodox. Like I have no desire, like I don't believe in the Orthodox doctrines. Like I was aware at the time of what they were, their objections to like the papacy, which in my mind, the papacy was like the only difference between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. Cause once again, teenager, don't know everything. And so I drive over there, I'm wearing my like Saint Benedict crucifix around my neck. And I talk with the man who would become my Orthodox priest. And I'll be honest, we had a conversation, and I was hoping I'd be like wowed by it, like that I would, that he would tell me something and like it would just all click, but that wasn't really the case. But he did invite me to come to the liturgy. Like I said, I was a little hesitant because of that experience I had at the Eastern Catholic liturgy. And I initially didn't go, but I went the following week. And as soon as I get to the liturgy, his wife like greets me at the beginning and like hands me like a binder, and she's like, "Oh, you see, there's a catechumen over there. Why don't you go sit next to him? He'll help you through the service." So like already like 5 minutes in, I've had like more human interaction in an Orthodox church than I did in like my entire time in the Catholic Church. And that really like spoke to me. And then it's exactly like what you said. Like when I went to that liturgy, it felt like what I was reading about was finally like present in like what I was experiencing, like that there was like this fullness of the liturgy. And so, and then of course, the community was just so welcoming. It was almost like very overwhelming because like I had gone from like experiencing nothing of like what a Christian community is supposed to be like to like seeing like what I later found out. I mean, over the years, I would learn that this parish really is something special, like in terms of like dedication to community, liturgy. I mean, it is better than even the majority of Orthodox churches I've been to in the country. And of course, I didn't know that at the time. So it was like probably the best like first impression of Orthodoxy I could have possibly gotten. And so
Yeah. Well, let that be a lesson to all our, our priests and pastors out there that, just a warm welcome to the liturgy, come and see kind of mentality that, and to your point, when I came back into the church, it wasn't our priests coming up with some, great wisdom, right? Some turn of phrase or whatever. It was just the attitude of rest in the knowledge of the church, right? And just come back, come worship with us. And it because I think for some people who come to the faith intellectually, like clearly the three of us had that kind of journey. We're intellectually first, right? There comes a point where it's like that has to go away, and all I want is Christ and his church, basically. And so the lesson in that is, priests and pastors, a simple invite can do so much. Yeah. Obviously, in your case here, Ben.
Yeah, there's
too.
a point at which, like we said before, where naked rationality can only get you to this precipice where you then have to seek out, like, okay, which religion is the one that this God self-revealed himself. But then you get to another point on the far end of Revelation where now you're like, now I need to make a choice on the side of Revelation. Like, where do I go and what do I do? And sometimes the subjective can take over a little bit, in a good way. And I don't mean in a bad way, I mean like in a good way. So at this point then, now that you're sort of swimming a little bit with Orthodoxy, so you haven't become Orthodox yet. You're just still kind of like, you're just attending weekly. Okay.
Yes.
And you said this is an Oriental Orthodox
Oh
church?
no, this is Eastern Orthodox Church.
Okay.
I just said.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
Okay.
is it at this point then that you encounter better Orthodox apologetics like, Filioque or like Sergius Bulgakov or like Schmemann, or even modern, like, one of my faves is Father Reardon, Patrick Reardon.
Dion?
Yeah. So
Reardon,
were you now swimming in like better Orthodox thinkers?
Yeah. So I was just, as soon as I had that experience of the Orthodox liturgy, I just never stopped going. I just kept going back week after week, even though I wasn't like fully intellectually, I was still very convinced of the Catholic faith. I was still very like, I don't see how Orthodoxy is true, but I'm just going to keep going because I want to figure that out. And eventually my priest, he asked me, he's like, do you want to become a catechumen? And I'm like, sure. And he gave me, I'm like, sure, why not?
Sure.
And he had me read Vladimir Lossky's book, Dogmatic Theology. And I also bought a copy of Father Bulgakov's The Orthodox Church, which I read through a bit of that. And I will say, it definitely, exposed me to a little bit more in-depth Orthodox theology, which I appreciated. But I was so hung up on this issue of like ecclesiology and the papacy that I remember like when I came across Lossky's section on ecclesiology, I got very excited. I'm like, okay, this is finally going to be it. I'm going to finally get the answer to all this stuff. And I remember being kind of disappointed by the things he had to say about it. Same with Father Bulgakov. I didn't really find his address of these issues to be that persuasive. It wasn't until really after I was chrismated in the Orthodox Church, I'd say maybe like a couple months or maybe a year afterwards, that I finally found Father Laurent Kleinwerk's book, His Broken Body, which I think which was really like the first very serious like Orthodox response to Catholic ecclesiology. That didn't just try to like tear down Catholic ecclesiology, but also tried to like build up an Orthodox, a positive Orthodox ecclesiology.
I've never heard of that one.
So,
I've never heard that book.
Yeah, that was a book that was probably the most formative for me as, in my journey through ecclesiological
So you kind of take
thought.
is it after that then that you take Orthodoxy by the horns then, and you're gonna commit to this?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I pretty much decided that I'm going to become Orthodox before I was fully intellectually convinced of it. Which, like I said, I'm not just a purely rational being. Like I fell in love with this parish community, with this liturgy, and I just figured like something this good and beautiful, like can't hurt. And that's kind of basically the way I was thinking of it. And I really just didn't want to become Catholic at that point. I had no desire to become Catholic. I just wanted to become Orthodox because I wanted to join this Orthodox community that I was just coming to know and love. And so I really did, I would say I did join like before I really like was firmly convicted of the truthfulness of Orthodoxy, I would say. So my actual like conviction of like the truthfulness of Orthodoxy definitely came like a couple months or almost even like a full year after my conversion to Orthodoxy, when I found books like Father Lawrence Kleinwork's His Broken Body, and then also Dr. Edward Szyczenski's The Filioque History of a Doctrinal Controversy. And also that's when I discovered the writings of Seraphim Hamilton, if you're familiar with him at all. He was also very formative in my Orthodox theological thinking.
As far as your involvement then with this Orthodox parish, what did that look like? Were you just a dude in the pews, or what were you doing?
Oh no, I was like, as soon as I
There were no pews. He was standing.
Very good.
That's right, all is standing. But no, as soon as I was chrismated, so I was chrismated in 2019 on the Saturday of St. Lazarus, April 20th, and that as soon as that happened, I became an altar server. I started chanting. So they taught me like this church like focused a lot on congregational singing and like chanting, and like a lot of emphasis was put on that. So I was like taught how to sing, how to chant. I was also briefly a Sunday school teacher for a time. So I was very involved with this.
Wow, they put you to work quick.
Yes. Yes, they did.
So when you say congregational singing, what do you mean by that?
Like we really felt like the choir would be like with the people like in the congregation, and then like it was very encouraged for like the people to like, everyone had all the music. It was very encouraged for everyone to like sing in the best way they could, because we had a lot of very musically gifted people at that parish. And so there was a lot of
that's a
my
blessing.
experience of Orthodoxy, like when I was in Greek churches, was that nobody does any of the responses or sings or anything. It's literally just the reader and the priest like, going back and forth, and then the people just like doing their cross at the right times. And some people would do like the amen, like they kind of get one out, but it was more like a low whisper or a hum or something. But I have also been to some Orthodox churches. Like I went to a Syriac church once where the singing was like, I mean, they were going to tear the roof off this place. And then some Byzantine Catholic churches, especially the Ruthenians, they tend to sing like, really well congregationally. It's super beautiful though. I mean, totally. I know exactly like how you were feeling, because there were so many times where I was, at an Orthodox church, Orthodox parish, like especially my wife's, at the time, her Greek parish, whenever I was there, I was just profoundly moved, just by the ethos of the East. It's not even just like that, like a self-hating Westerner who like just wants to have this exotic experience, because I know there's a lot of that. That's not what it was for me. It was like, even in spite of like the cultural stuff, there was just something about the candor. It's very masculine. Like the priests, when they chant, are men. And the women, when they chant, are women. And the music is like, who gives a crap if we have musical instruments? We're just going to use our voices, and the wording of the prayers, saying everything 3 times. It feels like you're in the temple, but at the same time, Orthodoxy has this way of making you feel like you're in the living room, like you're in a house. So they've carried on the ethos of a house church, but also a temple. So it's like those two things, and especially when you're studying patristics, like me and Dan and stuff, it's like, wow, like, this is it, But again, it's like gnawing at you is some of those more doctrinal, dogmatic, and like those kinds of questions, those intellectual questions. So how did you begin the journey, the intellectual journey out of Orthodoxy? I mean, don't take us out of Orthodoxy yet. I mean, keep us where you're at. But but
keep us there, baby. Keep us there.
But what were some of those
let's marinate in it
movements intellectually while you're in the Orthodox Church?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot that could be said there, but I guess I'll just start with like kind of like what I was going with my background. Like you can imagine that ecclesiology was a big issue for me. And like I said, or like you were saying, when you're in the middle of the divine liturgy and you're singing the cherubic hymn, let us lay aside all earthly cares, you're not going to care like what some bishop in the 7th century had to say about the Pope. Like that's not on your mind. It's the other 6 days a week where that's what's going through your head. And I remember, I did find answers to, certain objections from Catholicism, like people like Seraphim Hamilton, Ubi Petrus, Father Laurent Kleinwerk, they kind of provided a framework for me to think about, St. Peter is, all the bishops are the successors of St. Peter, and like, each local bishop is like the Peter of his diocese, with the apostles formed around him and all this. But it was really around like 2020, like when the COVID pandemic hit, and we kind of like went through lockdown, and I wasn't as active in my parish community because of all the restrictions and stuff, and I was kind of just left with like me and the faith, take away all the smells and bells, you take away all the beauty, as great and wonderful as those things are, that's not the substance of the faith. And so 2020 is really when I was left with just the substance of Orthodoxy, taken away from all its beauty and glory in that you see in the real world, and just left with what does actually teach. And I was confronted once again with some of the texts that made me very convinced of Catholicism, namely among them being like the letter of Pope St. Agatho to the Sixth Ecumenical Council, where Agatho says in no uncertain terms that when our Lord stood in the flesh before St. Peter at Caesarea Philippi, he appointed him as the head of the church, and that is why the popes of Rome will be the leaders of the church until the end of time. And you see that same phrase, you see that exact same teaching at the Third Ecumenical Council with Philip the Legate. And in fact, he even says, as it has been known in all ages, when Vatican I says that, they're actually quoting Philip the Legate from the Third Ecumenical Council when they say that. And like that just kind of like struck me. And what really struck me, I was also reading, St. Maximus the Confessor, who was like this great Eastern saint who had a lot, who kind of scores a lot of points on the Orthodox side of like the Filioque debate, essence energy debate kind of thing. And here he is seeming to affirm the infallibility of the Apostolic See of Rome. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. And same with Saint Theodore the Studite. Also in his letter to Pope Paschal I, he's affirming in no uncertain terms that the Pope of Rome is, that he will remain undefiled from heresy until the end of time, and all this stuff. And that's against the backdrop of like the Seventh Ecumenical Council, where Pope Hadrian sends his letter, which proclaims almost stronger claims than Vatican I would say, at the Seventh Ecumenical Council. I remember the first time I read the letter of Hadrian, I was shocked. Like, wow, this was read out at an ecumenical council? And it's just stuff like that was like kind of like marinating in my mind. And, it seems like all these Eastern and Western bishops are proclaiming this together. And so like when I was actually looking at like the substance of the faith, I was like, okay, this doesn't seem to be lining up with Orthodox ecclesiology. And that was deeply troubling to me. And so that kind of is what got me to start, reconsidering Catholicism again, was just reading the fathers and just seeing like, what are they actually saying about the papacy? And what are they actually saying about like some of these other issues I was coming to understand were dividing lines between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, like the, divine simplicity. Like, I mean, obviously that's not like as dogmatic of an issue, I would say, between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. But I mean, in my honest reading of the fathers, I just could not see where they're getting this, where they condemn like Aquinas's divine simplicity as heretical. Like that's a very prominent view in the Orthodox Church. And I just, when I read like St. Basil, I see, absolute divine simplicity. I don't see any essence energy distinction in him. He seems very clear about, the absolute simplicity of God, all this stuff. And
so it's interesting. There's always
and there were another.
There's always this come back to the sources kind of moment, I think, in conversions, and it's awesome. It's great. I commend you for going to the sources, but not sources I would have thought you were going to mention. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like these Orthodox champions or Eastern champions are starting to convince you otherwise.
Yes, and I will say there was also like a lot of like turmoil within the Orthodox theological dialogue that was getting me to second guess, specifically over the issue of what's called like sacramental rigorism. If you're familiar with that term at all, there's basically like this big debate in the Orthodox Church over whether or not those outside of the Orthodox Church have valid sacraments. And there's like a huge divide over this. Like there are large swaths of the Orthodox Church.
And you're talking about
do
today,
not
right?
believe
This
that
isn't the third
anyone else-
century.
Yes, exactly. This is a debate that goes back to
Right.
the third century, to the dispute between Cyprian and Stephen, and it's still being hashed out today. And that was something I found deeply troubling for a number of reasons. The first one being, of course, that this was a settled issue, right? When Saint Vincent de Lorenz is writing his Commoditorium, he speaks of this as an example of the church, having a doubt about a matter and coming to a definitive resolution about it. This is the example he cites, is this very issue. And so, like, the fact that you have in the 18th century an Eastern Orthodox council represented by three of the patriarchs, three of like the four patriarchs, saying that Western baptisms are invalid, like that to me was quite striking, and it was kind of personal to me as well, because there's this idea, even among those in the Orthodox Church who believe that sacraments outside the church are valid, those people do not believe that what's called single immersion baptism is valid. So like, Baptists, when you only baptize with one immersion, they would say, so someone like Father Daniel Syzoyev, who believed that like Catholics have valid baptisms, for instance, would say that like Baptists didn't have valid baptisms. And this is like the norm in Russia. They don't treat them as having valid baptisms. And that was troubling for me because my priest was a Baptist convert. And so it got me to start questioning, like, okay, well, does that mean he's not really a priest? And does that mean that I'm not really Orthodox? Because there really is no, like, because if you read like certain canons from like the ecumenical councils, it does seem to say like single immersion baptisms, you could make the argument from the Orthodox perspective that those are invalid. And I really had no response to that. And so it was raising also these questions of like authority over like, who is the one who gets to authoritatively determine the truthfulness of these canons, because when I was reading church history, it seems like, who is creating these canons? It's the church coming together in council and giving like very definitive solemn judgments about things. And like, yes, there have been councils in the Orthodox Church, like, the Council of Jerusalem, 1672, the Council of Jassy, 1642. But most Orthodox Christians don't even know what those councils are. And they certainly don't treat them as like dogmatically binding on their theology. Like you'll be hard pressed to find like an Orthodox manual of theology that even like cites those councils, like the way a Catholic theology manual will like cite the Council of Trent. It just like the issue of authority was starting to come up a lot for me, because then I was that kind of paired with my reading of all these sources that talk about the papacy, the divine institution of the Bishop of Rome, and that Christ established an apostolic college that has divine teaching authority, that has, disciplinary authority, and that they can actually enact that, and they have throughout history. All of that was just kind of coming together, and things were not looking very like good from the Orthodox perspective.
One of the things that I'm glad that Eric Ibarra has brought up before too is when he always emphasizes, I think it's very, very wise to say this, is that there is no East or West in Christ. So like if I'm quoting Pope Leo to you, for instance, I'm not quoting a Western saint. I'm quoting an Orthodox saint, right? Like, so all of these like Western fathers, but even fathers in the East who for some reason are kind of considered Western just because of their view of the papacy, and but you're like, well, yeah, but these are Orthodox saints. They're on your calendar. So what do you say about it? So that's kind of one of the moves that Orthodox apologists will use, is that they'll sort of like first break you off into those intellectual categories of East and West, and they'll say, okay, so if you quote any Western saint to me now, it's irrelevant, and I'm just going to keep quoting these over here that are our buddies. You're like, well, yeah, but we're trying to prove that the Catholic Church believed X, Y, or Z during this time, right? So that's one thing that was really a good point that Eric brought up and struck me, and I'm glad you brought up rebaptism, because I think that is a very good. And I know that at this point, like some Orthodox apologists will like roll their eyes and be like, "Oh, you're gonna bring that up, right?" But yeah, I'm gonna bring that up. Like I'm legit gonna bring that up because that's a serious issue. We're talking about like the heart of our faith, like getting baptized, and you have to be able to make a decision for the faithful on whose baptisms are valid and whose aren't. But see, this is the thing, though, is that this is where it's a test case, like a laboratory, right? You have like, okay, or Orthodox, this is your great moment. You can't agree on something that is central to faith that the West has had a decision on for a long time. Go. And see, like, this is the conciliar church, right? They make decisions through council. It's like, okay, who's going to call the council? How are you going to gather it? Can you gather it? If you can't, how are you a conciliar church? And for me, I like right where you're at right now is like kind of, I was at that point too. And for me, there were two things that really came out, and speak to this if this also like came to you, but it struck me that like Orthodoxy has had different ideas about its own ecclesiology as time has gone on, whereas Rome has always claimed this crazy thing about itself, right? Like, we can all agree that's a crazy thing to say about yourself, you know? But it has always said it, and it never stopped saying it, and it kept saying it. Even when it seemed like ridiculous to assert it, they continued to.
Really, from the first moment that a Pope of Rome is speaking to the world, they're saying it.
Yeah, speaking in this way about this office, there's just something about whatever they inherited that they just were not going to let go of. And in the East, though, you see this move from like a Caesaropapal model, but then that gets dropped, right? And it's more like, oh, now we're like a conciliar model, but then that gets dropped, and now it's like autocephaly, like self-governing churches. And so you're kind of like, well, wait, like, how could the ecclesiology of the church on a matter like this change? And they would sort of point you to, well, that's because the locus of the authority in the church is the bishop with his priest and his deacons in his diocese, right? And
Saint Ignatius of Antioch,
right, and you can go with that, right? Like you can go, okay, like I think it's John Zazoulis who makes that argument about the bishop and his Eucharist, right? Like that's really the locus of authority, and everything else is sort of outward, right? Like how we sort of structure how the bishops are going to get along with each other is sort of an outward thing, and that can change. But the thing is, though, you'll notice that they developed it from the bishop, right, to like this metropolitan level, and then from the metropolitan to like this patriarch level, and then they stop. And you're like, so when the patriarchs come together, that's it now. Like, there's no, like, that doesn't continue, that idea of like a universal primate, no way, right? So that was something to me that I was like, all right, that's where that doesn't make sense to me. Was that kind of where you were at?
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties into what you were saying earlier about, like, you know, there is no East, there is no West, because you go back to the 3rd century. You go back to St. Stephen of Rome, and at least based on the testimony of St. Firmilian of Caesarea, we know that he claimed that because he holds the succession of Peter, on whom the foundations of the church were laid, that's why he has authority over territories that seem outside of his jurisdiction. And this is the same century that St. Cyprian says that the faith of the Romans, faithlessness could have no access to them, right? So he's saying whatever they believe at Rome, that's the Orthodox faith right there, right? You go to the 5th century, we have that profession of faith from Philip the Legate, right, where he explicitly he gives the profession of faith that's quoted at Vatican I about, you know, Bishop of Rome, successor of Peter. Now he says now and forever. He says forever the bishops of Rome, by the divine appointment of Christ, will be the leaders of the church. And St. Cyril of Alexandria himself says that profession of faith stands manifest to the Holy Synod of Ephesus. That was St. Cyril of Alexandria, right? You go, and this is the 5th century. I mean, this is the same century that you have people like Theodore of Cyrus praising the faith of the Romans. Throughout the entire first millennium, everyone is praising the faith of the Romans. Like, if you want to know what orthodoxy is, you look at what the Church of Rome is teaching. And yet, like you've been saying, you go to the 3rd century, the 5th century, the 6th century, I mean, especially by the time you get to popes like Leo, like Agatho, like Hadrian, there's no doubt whatsoever that they were proclaiming papal infallibility in very explicit terms. And yet, far from rejecting that, the Eastern Fathers are still praising the orthodoxy of the See of Rome. I mean, St. Sophronius of Jerusalem, he says you can wander to, you know, the farthest ends of the earth, right? And you will, you know, once you come across Rome, you will see the heart of the Orthodox faith. And so given that, when you look at Rome in the first millennium, you would expect to see Eastern Orthodoxy. If I'm an Orthodox Christian, right, I would expect Rome to be the most Eastern Orthodox diocese in all of Christendom, right? And yet, when I look at Rome and I look at what is she actually teaching about herself, this is supposed to be the pinnacle of Orthodox, you know, Christianity. It's, you know, papacy from top to bottom. And this goes back, like you said, the Rome has always claimed this. I mean, what's said at Vatican I is essentially the logical conclusion of what she's been claiming since at least the 3rd century.
Actually, it's a truncated
and the thing is,
because whatever they were claiming in the 3rd and 4th century was actually way more blown out of proportion than Vatican I was. So.
Yes. It was. And I mean, on top of that, I should also mention here the issue of the Filioque, which played a large role in my conversion to Catholicism, was because, Seraphim Hamilton made an excellent video, I think. If you want to know like the Orthodox rejection of the Filioque, he made an excellent video on his channel about that. And he cites Vladimir Lasky, who I think hit the nail on the head, where he says that the Filioque, the doctrine that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, that was the sole dogmatic grounds, the sole dogmatic justification for the schism between East and the West. Everything else, the papacy, Immaculate Conception, whatever you want to say, that all came later. It started with the Filioque. It started with those in the East saying that not only was the insertion of the Filioque into the creed wrong, canonically, a canonical crime, but it was a violation of the Catholic faith. It was a violation of the apostolic faith. And, for a long time, I didn't really look into the Filioque debate, but, eventually I decided, okay, I'm going to actually seriously look into this. And so I started, reading, St. Augustine. I thought there might be a way to read Augustine in a non-Filioquist Catholic way. There's not. There's just not. It's so...
We're here to tell you.
Rest be
We're here to
assured,
tell
listeners.
you guys.
Yeah. It's not. There's no way. Augustine very clearly taught the Filioque. And it wasn't just him, though, because Augustine's theology was inherited by all of his successors. And even it goes before him. I mean, the Filioque goes back to people like Tertullian and Didymus the Blind, people even in Eastern Trinitarian thought. And it's even picked up at the Alexandrian school with St. Athanasius and St. Cyril, very clearly teaching that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. And in terms of hypostatic procession, not in terms of energetic procession, which would have been unheard of in the first millennium, this idea of an energetic procession. And you see that in Augustine, you see that in St. Hilary of Poitiers, you see that in Ambrose and Leo and Gregory. Pretty much the entire Western tradition is professing the Filioque. And that's why when I started reading about the Council of Florence, and I started reading about some of the Greek delegates there, such as Cardinal Bessarion of Nicaea, right? He was a Greek delegate who, he really believed in the Eastern Orthodox faith, but he went to the Council of Florence with an open mind, and he heard the testimony from the Latin fathers, and he's like, wow, these are our fathers too. There is no Greek East and Latin West. He's like, the fathers have to stand together. And so for him, even just the Latin fathers universally teaching the Filioque was enough for him to say, yeah, I guess this is part of the Catholic faith. And that's what I was really coming to see is for me to justify being Orthodox, I would have to say that all of these saints on the calendar are just heretics, right? Because keep in mind, I mean, the Filioque, that justifies a schism that's lasted 1,000 years, right? That's what it's supposed to do. Yet if it goes back to the 4th or even the 3rd century, what really point is there in defending this idea of ecclesial infallibility or the consensus of the fathers? Because even if you could fall back and say, well, the Eastern fathers rejected it. Well, number one, I don't really think they did. Even Maximus, I don't think can be read as rejecting the Filioque. But even if they did, I mean, you're just pitting fathers against fathers, which, for the fathers of the Council of Florence, they saw that as an overthrow of the Catholic faith. That would have been the end of Christianity right there, if these fathers were contradicting each other on a matter so significant like the Filioque. And I was really coming to sympathize with someone like Cardinal Bessarion and realize, if I was in his shoes, I probably would go the same direction. I would not be like Mark of Ephesus, who really seemed to be trying to force this contradiction in the fathers. I'm like, why would you be trying to force this contradiction just to justify a schism? It seemed very just not of the Holy Spirit to me.
Wow, interesting.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so these are the issues that you're working through as an Orthodox. Are you a reader? Or wait, what are you in the church then? You're a reader?
I was not
Okay.
ordained to any minor clergy.
Okay,
I was just
okay.
an altar server. Yeah.
So, now take us through the more subjective, how you eventually, 2 things, try to accomplish this, will you? So number one, yes, you're starting to see that the house of cards is starting to crumble for you. However, we have the anomaly of the Francis pontificate at the same time happening, which has been a lot of fodder for Orthodox. They're having a nice time. So
Holy Father.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what's currently going on. Did you really just do that, Dan?
I had to.
So they're yeah. So that's going on, but then also tell us how you come to, like, I don't know, meet Father Tom. So people should know that you actually go to our parish now. You are you read at our parish and serve
Lector and server.
And that was all just by, like, dude, I had no idea. To be honest with you, like, we were friends on Facebook and, like, you know, talking Eric Ybarra threads and all these kinds of things. But I had no idea you even lived in Illinois, let alone that like, you were talking to Father Tom about the potential of becoming Catholic. So why don't you take us through now, like, your way out of the Orthodox Church, dealing with, say, some of the controversy of the Francis Pontificate, while also talking with Father Tom and sort of moving towards Catholicism.
Yeah, definitely. A lot to say there again. But I guess to start, like, obviously, as I was, like, moving more towards a Catholic understanding, like, you know, I was still, like, of a similar mindset to how I was when I first became Orthodox. Like, I'm like, I do not want to become Catholic. Like, on the one hand, I've only had poor experiences, you know, in, like, real life parishes. And on the other hand, you know, you have this Pope who's, like, doing all kinds of weird things that I don't even like what, like, this issue about, like, the death penalty, you know, he's now allowing adulterers to go to communion now. Like, what is, you know, I don't even, I never really was looking into that stuff at the beginning of my journey to Catholicism. I was so focused on these, like, East-West issues, this stuff of the fathers and the Bible and all this stuff. And so now that I'm starting to take Catholicism more seriously, I start looking more into, you know, what's going on with Pope Francis and stuff like that. And honestly, there was a time where I was even looking into Protestantism because I really, like, didn't want to become Catholic. Like, I was like, I was looking, I was like, it seemed to me like, Orthodoxy is not a viable option. Like, and it really came down to this, that, even if Catholicism was false, Orthodoxy was still false. Like, the Filioque being true, like, that puts Orthodoxy out of the running, right? No matter what Pope Francis says or does, like, he could do anything. They would not change reality. That in the first millennium, the dogma, the doctrine of the papacy, in its core, as it logically would progress at Vatican I, was affirmed by both East and West. That fact will not be changed by anything Pope Francis says or does. And the truthfulness, the fact that the Filioque was taught by the consensus of the fathers of both East and West, that fact will also not be changed by anything Pope Francis says or does. And so I realized, like, okay, no matter what I think about the modern state of the Catholic Church, you know, I just know I can't in good conscience remain Orthodox. And so even if that means I have to, like, become Protestant now or something, like, I just
So that's interesting, because then you're saying there was a edifice of the Church's indefectibility or infallibility is crumbling because of the claims of the Orthodox, saying the unanimous consent of the fathers, like, that is authoritative, right? So, like, if it's not, even if it's not Catholicism, right, then it still wouldn't be Orthodoxy, you're saying, because there was this unanimous consent, and then all of a sudden they contradicted it. And I think that's an interesting point, because in my own journey too with, like, Catholicism, a lot of the let's say the peculiar doctrines of the Catholic Church that the Orthodox East doesn't share, none of those doctrines though contradicted anything that is written in the fathers. But you do have these things in Orthodoxy where, like, that's a contradiction of the fathers, like the whole rebaptism thing, like, or divorce and remarriage, right, or contraception, like these sorts of things, like, or the ecclesiology issue, like you said, you know, like with Petrine succession. So it's like those are all, you're contradicting the fathers, and so now you're in the game of cherry picking which fathers you like and which ones you don't.
Which is a Protestant thing, anyway.
Exactly.
So you might as well
So
be Protestant.
exactly. So now I do see the logic with where you're going. So So go anyway. Go ahead.
That's interesting.
Continue.
Yeah, no, and I, you know, at this time, like, this is like maybe like a year, 2 years ago, something like that. Like, I started making, like, really intelligent Protestant friends who, you know, really were, like, challenging me on certain issues, you know, related to, like, apostolic succession and all this stuff, like, really pushing me to, like, know what it is I believe. And I was open, you know, for, like, the first time, I was really open to Protestantism being true, because, you know, I knew that I really couldn't be Orthodox, but I also really didn't want to become Catholic because of all the weird stuff happening in the Catholic Church. And so I was like, okay, this really does seem to be the route I'm being pushed down. Because if I'm going to be Orthodox, I'm just going to be, doing my own interpretation of the fathers, not really having a lot of authority to do so anyways. So, Protestantism doesn't seem very far off, which, I'm not trying to say that like Orthodoxy is like Eastern Protestantism or something like that. Like, no, I wouldn't want to say that, but like from a like, from like the bird's eye perspective, when you trace out certain, belief systems to their logical conclusions, I do believe that is where you end up. You end up having to say that the church, you have no defense of the church's indefectibility. If you say that, the Filioque is wrong, well, I guess all the fathers were wrong about this. And I guess, if the papacy is wrong, then I guess at least 3 ecumenical councils taught heresy, And so it's like, at that point, you've kind of thrown out the infallibility of the church, and you might as well, look into Protestantism.
Did you throw all this at Father Tom's lap?
Oh, no.
He's probably, oh boy, this is going to be a long night.
This was... this is like, for me, I feel like I'm the kind of person who, like, I don't have other people resolve these issues for me. I have to resolve them myself, and I do it in dialogue with other people. So, like, my relations with other people and, like, talking about this kind of stuff, it's purely so that I can help myself come to better know this. So I was talking to, like, Eric Yabar and I became, like, pretty good friends on Facebook. And we, I would like ask him questions, and we'd have like phone calls and send voice messages back and forth. And I also have like really good Reformed friends who, we'd meet for like Bible study. We'd get together. We'd have very long discussions, long into the night, about these things. And yeah, so I was kind of just like going at my own pace,
I envy it because, Steve, you'll recall those days in our cohort in graduate school, long into the night, Protestants, Orthodox, whoever, everybody from every stripe there, and you're just hitting things off each other. That's a very nice place to be.
Very formational, and that's the purpose. That's the purpose of dialogue. Like that's the purpose of even doing podcasts. Like that's why I've always been not so interested personally in apologetics. It turns me off. That's why, like, I think we posted before on our own page where we said, like, history and apologetics are often acquaintances but rarely friends. Because I feel like that sort of like strong proof texty apologetics is like, you're not getting anywhere here. Like we need to go back to the mud, right? Like, I hope that nobody has listened to this episode so far and thought that like Orthodoxy doesn't have a case against Catholicism. Like they totally do. Like they totally have a strong case against Catholicism, as Catholicism has a strong case against them, and that's why you have a schism in the first place. Nothing is easy. So going back, I like the honesty of this, of going back and wrestling with it and having good dialogue partners to bounce things off each other. And like, dude, me and my best friend ended up like, he became Orthodox, I became Catholic, right? And so like literally we did everything together. Like our whole conversion with Dan as well, like our whole journey was together, and then boom, like he went to Orthodoxy and I went to Catholicism. So like these are not easy issues, and they're not clear cut. And I like that you had honest dialogue partners in that, instead of just like kind of the mudslinging apologetics, Yeah.
Yes.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it was. No. Yeah. No. That's a good point. Like I said, like I'm talking about all the reasons why I became convinced that the Orthodox faith is not viable and the Catholic faith is viable. The Orthodoxy definitely has its own case to present and there were certain issues such as, Pope Vigilius and the Fifth Ecumenical Council, I would say, is probably the biggest historical challenge to the Catholic doctrines of the papacy. But like I was saying, like even at that, like at most, let's say Pope Vigilius' situation falsifies Vatican I. That, once again, just undermines the infallibility of the first millennium tradition, because you still have the problem of Agatho's letter and Hadrian and all these Eastern and Western saints teaching the divine institution of the papacy. At that point, you've just falsified everybody, and the way that I was looking at it is, it seemed like Catholicism had the ability to absorb all of these difficulties and all of these problems in a way that Orthodoxy didn't. Orthodoxy essentially had to edit out the papal DNA of her identity. Whereas in Catholicism, we could keep that papal DNA in our ecclesiology and just kind of hold it in tension with these historical cases, with one where I think we're experiencing right now with a wayward pope who seems to be doing things that we maybe wouldn't expect God to allow a pope to do, but who he is. allowing to do those things. And as I was dialoguing with my Protestant friends, they were making very good cases, but for me it kept coming back to these fundamental issues about apostolic succession, authority, like who actually has the ability to preach the gospel, who has that authority to say, I speak in the name of Jesus Christ. Like, that's a bold thing to say, that I am preaching in the name of Jesus Christ right now. Like, who actually gets to claim that? And it was actually largely St. Francis de Sales in his work, The Catholic Controversy, that I think was kind of like the nail in the coffin for my flirtation with Protestantism, where I read that and I was just like, I mean, if you read just the first section where he talks about the mission of the church and how, like, the reformers, essentially what they were doing is they were trying to create a new ecclesiastical mission, like essentially ex nihilo, because they weren't claiming that they were sent specially from God, and they weren't sent from the ordinary mission of the church. So St. Francis asks, he's like, who sent you? Like, where did you, where were you told, who told you could preach these doctrines and administer these sacraments in this way? And so I was like, okay, and obviously there's more to it than just that. But that was what really made me realize, like, okay, I can't go to Orthodoxy, I can't go to Protestantism. And so at the end of the day, I'm just left with, I have someone like Pope Francis I have to deal with, every Thursday he's out.
I gotta say, I'm absolutely loving this. I'm like sitting back and loving this because it's like you're going in directions I did not think this was going to go. So Filioque is actually what's bringing you to Catholicism, and you're talking about Francis de Sales. I'm like, what is
happening?
These aren't things I expected to hear.
Well,
That's
especially
awesome.
on the Filioque front, because we're living in a time too where the West has this tendency to walk away from the Filioque, or at least walk away from like a full-throated defense of it. And kind of just be like, well, but like then you go back and read, like in the West though, like the theologians who are arguing for it, and like, no, they're like, no, this is the truth. Like, this is the truth, So it's interesting that you do have those two parties in the Western Church today too, where it's like some are like, no, the Filioque is like true. So it is required belief, right? And then you have other people who are saying like, well, no, it's a Western development. And they say it's and actually if we just say through the Son that it's solved. So
weren't there Anglican churches that we were going to that would put
brackets.
it in parentheses?
Yeah, they put it in brackets.
Yeah, brackets.
If I could say something to that real quick, I would say actually that there's this idea that you can just say through the Son and then that just resolves everything. But the problem is, the way that the Council of Blachernae, which was the Orthodox response to the Council of Lyons, which was the first council to like dogmatize the Filioque for Catholicism, they specifically condemned the proposition that the Holy Spirit proceeds through the Son in terms of his hypostasis, in terms of his person, in terms of like receiving the divine essence. So rather, when you see Orthodox writers in the medieval era using the phrase through the Son, they mean something other than the hypostatic procession of the Holy Spirit. And yet when you read like someone like St. Maximus, when he's saying through the Son, in my view, it's very clear that he's talking about the hypostatic procession.
What makes you think that?
And it just goes back to like, what is the Trinity? I mean, I think a lot of people, especially in the Orthodox sphere, they get so caught up in Trinitarian thinking that they kind of forget what the Trinity is. They forget that the Trinity is one God, three persons, and the only distinctions between those persons that we can rationally defend are relations of opposition. And so to speak of a divine attribute of the Holy Spirit that's different from what makes him his person is essentially to posit some kind of composition in God. It's to posit that there's this other thing besides hypostatic properties, this kind of energetic property that can somehow uniquely belong to the Holy Spirit, that he proceeds from the Father alone in his hypostasis, but he proceeds through the Son in terms of like his energy. Well, I thought the essence and energy and person, those are all inseparable, right? So how can you separate out these different parts of the Trinity? It's just, we're kind of outside the realm of rationality here. Yeah, it's not very coherent. Like, it can sound good and look good on paper. Like, it looks like a nice, neat, elegant solution of making these fine distinctions between different kinds of procession. But when you actually work out the philosophical math, it just doesn't add up. And I think if you want a really good treatment of that, I think Eric Ybarra's book on the Filioque, he has a really good treatment that kind of goes into the details of this idea of the energetic procession. And there's also a very good video on YouTube by this YouTuber named Duong called something like The Church Fathers Taught the Filioque, which that is a very good video. It's a little polemical, but it's not actually that polemical. He actually re-edited it to make it less polemical. So it's a very good video.
That reminds me of Lancelot in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. He's like, sorry. See, I just get carried away. Sorry. Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so now what do you do? So how did you get into contact with Father Tom? What happened there, dude?
So
I'd like to,
it's
I would
interesting.
like to actually. I haven't, even though you're serving alongside me, I haven't heard like your encounter with St. Mary's, your encounter with Father Tom. That whole.
Yes. Yeah. So it's interesting. So backing up a little bit, this is like maybe going back like 6, 7, 8 months ago. So I was in a Protestant campus ministry in college, and I had a friend in that ministry who, after graduation, she had a son, and even though she was evangelical, she had like this intuition to like have him baptized, and in the Catholic Church, because she was raised Catholic. And this is kind of like as I'm making my own journey, towards the Catholic Church, and so that just kind of like, I started talking to her again because like I was starting to talk to her about like the Catholic faith, and I was kind of like in a weird position because like I am Orthodox, like going to Orthodox liturgy, and like almost like trying to convince her to become Catholic. It's like a weird.
Just do.
Yeah,
just do
I
what
ain't never
can.
been there.
Just,
I ain't
just
been there.
do what I can't.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird situation because she was coming to be very disillusioned with evangelicalism, and I was starting to become disillusioned with Orthodoxy, and so it was just kind of like a natural progression towards the Catholic faith. And so I actually initially found St. Mary's because I was looking for a Catholic parish for her to go to, because like I figured like if she's going to be Catholic, I didn't want her to like just go to some random Novus Ordo parish around town. And so I think I asked Eric Ybarra. I was more just like complaining to him, like partially about like not being able to find Catholic parishes, partially for me, partially for my friend. And so he like just posted on Facebook, he's like, what are good Catholic parishes in the Chicagoland
Dude,
area?
I commented
and I think
on
you,
that.
Stephen, yeah, you commented on that. That was for me.
Oh my goodness!
And that was,
I think I commented on it
yeah,
too.
so probably, yeah. Eric, he posted that because of me.
Oh my
and so
gosh.
then I think he's the one who sent me St. Mary's information, and he got it from you. So that's how I was put into contact with Father Tom.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You're welcome.
And so
And,
yeah, we got you. So I know you were meeting with him quite often, quite frequently, and I know Father Tom's approach. Father Tom's approach is keep thinking.
He's very pastoral.
Keep doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
but keep praying.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was, and I do want to emphasize that, like, this was not a purely intellectual journey for me. Like, in the course of the years that I was, like, researching these issues, I ended up dating a Catholic girl, and she actually introduced me to a lot of, like, Catholic spirituality stuff, such as, like, Saint Therese of Lisieux and, like, her spirituality, and, like, really, like, showing me, like, that there is a lot of spiritual riches in the Catholic Church, in like terms of like devotionals, in terms of like her, like even just like the moral theology of the church, I think is very spiritually formative. Like my ex-girlfriend is the one who red pilled me on not lying, like that lying is like always wrong. And so like I like stopped lying, and that like had like a big impact in my spiritual life and stuff like that. And so part of my like spiritual journey was like reading about Catholic saints, praying the rosary. I went to there's an adoration chapel right near my college dorm, and I went there actually very frequently when I was in college, and I remember I was joking with one of my friends, like, oh yeah, I just went to Adoration Chapel thinking nothing was going to happen because I went there. Just this Eastern Orthodox guy in an Adoration Chapel, and I actually, so I was meeting with Father Tom. I don't know how many times we actually met. I met with him for the first time, just kind of like explaining everything to him, like where I'm at. And he's just like, yeah, just pray about it, think about it. Like I wasn't going there like expecting him
Right.
to like answer all my questions. I knew that my questions were things I had to answer for myself. I was just looking to like, get connected with a real life Catholic parish. And then I started attending like Catholic Mass more. I went to St. Mary's for Mass a couple times, and I really, enjoyed it. I liked the Eastern atmosphere there. I felt, the smell of incense, makes me feel very at home in a church. And then I was praying the rosary, and I found out that at a certain point when I had decided to become Catholic, I told my ex-girlfriend that I was becoming Catholic, and I told her that I was planning on becoming Catholic on the feast of Saint Therese, because her spirituality just like meant a lot to me in that whole process. And she told me that like back in like the winter of that year, that she had like prayed a prayer of consecration of me to Saint Therese, that I would like become Catholic.
Wow.
That's
and
great.
so I
Well,
thought
and
that
Father Tom has a great devotion to St.
Yeah,
Therese
he
as
does.
well, and we have a shrine to her in our church.
Yes, yeah, she's awesome. And actually, the National Shrine of Saint Therese is right near my house, so I spent a lot of time there over the summer, just visiting there. So I say all that just to emphasize that, like, this was also like a very like spiritual journey for me. It wasn't just purely intellectual, and that's really what I needed. Like, I felt like at the beginning of my Christian journey, I was very intellectually in tune with the Catholic faith, but spiritually, I just wasn't there. And it took like that long process of God bringing me through the Orthodox Church, exposing me to like real liturgy, real spirituality, and like kind of like preparing my heart to like accept the fullness of the Catholic faith in all of her riches, from the intellectual tradition, the spiritual tradition, all
Yeah,
of it.
I even myself, I would say I'm still in process, of fully appreciating Catholic, specifically Roman Catholic, like Latin Catholic spirituality, because I was brought really just through my Christian journey a lot with influence from the East, and it's more natural. Like, I don't know, it's like more natural to me to like gravitate towards like the Jesus prayer as opposed to the Rosary. Like, not that they're in conflict or anything, but you know what I mean. I would prefer the Jesus prayers,
Right.
and so icons, like, instead of statues, like, so there's just like a lot of that, but even just like a lot of the the stories of like the Eastern monks, that's like a huge one, with like all their advice, like, Father, give me a blessing or something, and then they give this like awesome like one-liner or something, like just the whole thing of spiritual fatherhood, prostration, so all of that is still very natural to me. So even myself, like, trying to like really relearn like the Catholic way of doing things, I guess you could say, is it's hard. It is. It's like, it's difficult, and you do feel like, why do I have to choose like between these two things? Like, which you don't. But
Yes.
I'm only one guy. I can't go to both churches on Sunday.
Yes.
But no,
exactly.
I really like that. When you came into St. Mary's, the building also like spoke to you, because it does have an Eastern vibe to it. The Eastern incense. Yes. I love the way that at our parish we do the prayers of the people, where it's the deacon like facing the altar and he chants them, and they even use some of the Byzantine Catholic like prayers at that point. So that probably like hit home for you, and then also having this devotion to Saint Therese, and then over there is like the shrine. It must have all just like kind of spoke to you. Can you speak to that, like when you first walked into the building?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, well, St. Mary's is like Byzantine architecture, and all of its glory. Lots of Eastern icons all over the place, and incense and
Domes.
and yeah, obviously, I mean, well, domes.
Gold
Yes,
leaf.
my Orthodox parish didn't have a dome, so it was it was great. I honestly, I don't think there could have been like a better like Latin parish I could have gone to be exposed to Catholic liturgy as it's supposed to be done. And so it was very a natural transition to me.
I feel like the last 2 years of renovations at the church were all for you, because it was Father Tom's mission. I'm serious. It's so funny, because Father Tom's mission over the last few years, as we've been doing the preservation fund and restoring the church, he wanted to embrace the Byzantine Romanesque architecture more and more. Like, that was his stated goal. I want to bring in the East. And so when you walk in the vestibule of our church, on the left side are all the Eastern saints and the Eastern icons, right? And then on the right side are all Western saints in icons, right? So bringing together the two traditions into one church, that was a stated goal of his. Like, I want both to live together here. And so to see his vision, and then to see an actual person coming into that church and have that effect on you, it's like, wow. That's what I love about Father Tom, honestly. He has this way about him. Yeah. He wants to appeal in many different ways to people, and he sees that building as an evangelistic tool, truly. That's what a church is. And to see it come to fruition in your life is really something.
Plus, it's so beautiful to be able to just say the come and see. You know, because the Orthodox always say that's kind of how they do evangelism. You know, it's like come and see, and like you can't always do that as a Catholic, unfortunately, because if you are at your local parish, you know, that's just kind of like not even like a bad Novus Ordo, but just kind of like your run of the mill one. It's like, you know, you almost like don't want to invite someone. I hate to say that, but you do. You're like, I don't know if that's really going to do much, you know, and that's a horrible thing to say. This is, you know, don't take this and run with it, people. But there is something about, like, how the Mass is celebrated and how the faith is presented in both of its lungs, breathing together, like at St. Mary's, that you can have that confidence of saying, like, no, literally, just come to Mass. Like, I can't sit here and try to convince you, you know, if you're thinking your own way through it and I'm thinking my own way through it, let's just go to Mass together, you know, and because that's what Dan did to me, honestly, because he was like, dude, just come out to Mass, and we went out there. And I've said this in a previous episode, but then my wife looked over at me and she's like, what have we been doing? You know, because, like, this is it. You know, this is it.
Yes.
But no, that's great. Is there anything else you want to add then to your journey that we maybe like skipped, or anything important step along the way?
Are you nervous about serving during Holy Week?
Looking forward
I'm going to put
it.
you to work
Looking
for Holy Week.
Okay, look forward to it. Yes. That about covers it all. I mean, just like tie it together. Like, you know, I like St. Mary's bringing together the Eastern and Western traditions, because that really is what the Catholic faith actually does, in a way that, you know, for all of its beauty and glory, the Eastern Orthodox faith just simply does not have the ability to do that. And, you know, like you were saying, like, if you go to local Novus Ordo Mass, it's not going to be really anything spectacular. But, you know, that is not the substance of the faith, right? The way that we outwardly present the faith, it's very important. And I very much care about liturgy and beauty and all that. But at the end of the day, it's the substance of the faith that really matters. And you know, if I was just going based on exterior beauty, I mean, I have no doubt I would want to stay at my Orthodox parish. And, you know, and to this day, like, you know, if they join back communion with Rome, like, as much as I love St. Mary's, I'm going back there. You know, that's what would happen. But at the end of the day, we have to remember, like, what really matters. What really matters is the faith that our Lord revealed to his apostles and the mission that he gave to them to preach the gospel unto the ends of the earth. And, you know, that mission has been given to men who sometimes don't exercise it very well. But that doesn't change the fact that they're the ones who have that mission. Even if that really pains us sometimes, you know, even if it doesn't look like it, even if it looks like these other people have it more than us, we have to remember, you know, it's ultimately about Jesus. You know, he's the reason we do any of this. He's the reason we care about any of this liturgy, any of this stuff, you know, and if we're not doing it for him, then there's no reason to be doing it at all. And that really is the ultimate reason why I, you know, became Catholic and going to stay Catholic, you know, no matter how bad things get. It's because, you know, this is the church that Christ founded. This is the faith he handed on, and this is, you know, the faith he wants all men to embrace. And yeah.
Well,
Amen.
that's
I can't. I'm not adding anything to that.
That's where we'll stop. That's great. Well, thanks, Ben, for coming on and for sharing your story. It really is. That's a really interesting story. And we did not even talk about this beforehand, so this was all coming at me live in front of all of you. So why don't you go ahead and tell the folks here how they can follow your work? Where can we follow you? I know that one time.
Can I just say caveat? I just want to commend you, Ben, on wise beyond your years. I mean, when I was you're 23, 22,
22.
Yeah. Okay. So remember in the sacristy, I said, oh, our deacon's about our age, And I'm thinking, wait a minute. I'm a heck of a lot older than Ben is, right? So I would just, I was not there when I was 22, and I envy it. I think you're on the right path, and I love you, brother.
Yeah.
It's been good to get to know you and continue to get to know you. So I commend you for it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Yeah, all by God's grace.
So how can our folks follow you if they want to either get in touch with you or follow your work?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get in touch with me, like you want to talk to me, I would say add me on Facebook. It's just Ben Bollinger. Look me up. You'll see a picture that looks like me wearing a cap and gown. Yeah, you can add me there if you like want to talk to me. Or if you want to follow my work, I mostly write on my Substack. So that is benjaminjohn.substack.com. I just recently, I write a lot about I just kind of like write about whatever's like on my mind at that given point in time. And so I recently just wrote an article about the Epistle of James's teaching on justification and comparing that with, certain Protestant interpretations of James and comparing that to their view of Romans and stuff like that. And then I also wrote an article on the Immaculate Conception of Mary, kind of going more into like biblical theology. So I do a lot of like biblical theology, historical theology. And then you can also find my YouTube channel, also called Benjamin John, where I just, once again, make videos about whatever I kind of feel like. I just recently put out a video about this excellent book that I highly recommend everyone read by Father Jean-Baptiste Saint-Germain and Saint Claude de la Colombera, called Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence. Like, life-changing book for me. It's just amazing. And I recently made a video on it, which was based on an article I wrote on my Substack, if you want to check that out. And so, yeah, that's the main way that you can find what I'm up to.
Fantastic. Well, to the rest of you, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying the content. A big thank you for Ben being on today. I hope that you all enjoyed it as much as we did. And be sure to tune in to the rest of our first 500-year series, because we'll be picking that right back up. I believe the next step in our journey should be some heretics. So I think we're going to start with. I think we're starting with Marcion with the next one. So be on the lookout for that. And thanks everybody for tuning in.